The notary put down her pen, looked across the table at my son-in-law, and said very quietly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Hartwell. There appears to be a problem with the title." My son-in-law's expression didn't change right away. That's the thing about confident people. It takes a moment for reality to break through. "What kind of problem?" he said. "The property listed in this agreement is registered under a numbered company. The sellers here," she gestured toward the documents in front of him, "are not the legal owners." My daughter looked at her husband. He looked at the notary. Then, slowly, they both looked toward the door at the back of the room, because that's when I walked in. "My name is Hugh Calloway. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years working for the city of Hamilton as a civil engineer, mostly water infrastructure, the kind of work that nobody notices until something goes wrong. My wife Beverly used to joke that I kept the city's pipes flowing, and nobody ever thanked me for it. She wasn't wrong, but I never minded. I'd rather do honest work quietly than do nothing loudly. Beverly passed away 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer. We were married for 38 years, and I won't pretend that her death didn't hollow me out for a long time. The house we'd shared in the East End of Hamilton felt enormous afterward. 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard she'd spent 15 years turning into something beautiful. After she was gone, I'd sit out there some mornings with my coffee and just try to remember what the point of it all was. Our daughter Carla is our only child. She and her husband Derek moved to the Hamilton area about 8 years ago, shortly after they got married. They'd been renting a place in Stony Creek, and things were tight. Derek worked in sales, software, I think, though the company changed names a few times over the years. Carla managed the front desk at a physiotherapy clinic. Between the two of them, they were getting by, but just barely. About 3 years after Beverly died, Carla came to visit on a Sunday afternoon. She brought Derek and their 2 kids. Owen was 7. Paige was 4. We had lunch. The kids ran around the backyard. It felt like a normal day, except that after the kids fell asleep on the couch, Carla sat across from me at the kitchen table, with that particular look she gets when she's trying to say something difficult. "Dad," she said, "we've been struggling. I already knew. You can tell with your children. The little signs. The slightly older car, the canceled trips, the way she sometimes looked at the grocery prices." She explained. Derek's company had gone through layoffs. They were 2 months behind on rent. Their landlord had given them 60 days. I listened without interrupting. Then I told her I had an idea. What neither Carla nor Derek knew was that about a year after Beverly's death, I had sold our family home and used the proceeds, along with a portion of Beverly's life insurance and my own retirement savings, to purchase a property on the west side of Hamilton through a numbered company my accountant had helped me set up. It was a standard estate planning arrangement here in Ontario. The house stayed out of probate, avoided certain tax complications, and gave me more flexibility over what happened to it after I was gone. Nothing unusual. Any good accountant would have suggested the same thing. The house itself was a solid 2-story on a quiet street near Dundurn Park. 3 bedrooms, a good-sized kitchen, a garage, close to decent schools. I'd been renting it to a young family, but their lease was ending. I offered it to Carla and Derek. They could live there for a modest monthly amount, enough to cover property taxes and basic maintenance, nowhere near market rent. I told them it was a rental arrangement. I didn't tell them who owned it. At the time, that felt like a private matter between me and my accountant. Family was family. I moved into a smaller place, a 2-bedroom apartment in Ancaster that suited me fine, close to the escarpment, good walking trails, quiet neighbors. Carla seemed relieved. Derek shook my hand firmly and said they wouldn't forget this. I believed him at the time. The first couple of years were good. Sunday dinners happened regularly. I picked Owen up from school sometimes when Derek had a late meeting. I watched Paige at the house on school PA days. We built routines. The grandchildren knew where to find me, and I knew where to find them. Then things shifted. It wasn't any single moment. That's what I keep coming back to. It was a slow erosion, the way a riverbank gives way. Not all at once, but grain by grain, until one day you look and realize something substantial is missing. Derek started doing well at work. Not exceptional, but better. They bought a new vehicle, went on a trip to Mexico, talked about renovating the kitchen, which was fine, good, even. Except that, as their circumstances improved, their gratitude seemed to thin out in proportion. Small things at first. Derek stopped asking how I was doing when I came over. Carla would be on her phone during dinner more often than not. The Sunday meals became every other Sunday, then occasional. I told myself they were busy. They were. But so was I, once, and I still found time. Then the comments started. Not cruel, exactly. Just the particular kind of careless that happens when someone stops seeing you as a full person. Derek mentioned once in front of the kids that the neighborhood wasn't what they'd hoped. Bit of a step down from where we thought we'd be by now, he said. He wasn't talking to me when he said it. He was talking to Carla, but I was sitting right there. Another time, Carla said she wished the kitchen were bigger. Whoever designed this layout wasn't thinking practically. Beverly and I had picked that house out carefully. The layout was perfectly practical, but I didn't say anything. What bothered me most, I think, was Derek's habit of referring to the house as our place in conversation, which was understandable to a degree. They did live there, but the way he said it, with full ownership in his voice, not tenancy, started to sit uneasily with me. I remember one evening in August, about 4 years in, I'd driven over to help Derek with some water pressure issues in the basement. Nothing major, a fitting on the main line that needed replacing. I had the part in my car and fixed it in about 40 minutes. As I was washing up at the laundry sink afterward, I heard Derek on the phone in the kitchen. The door was half open. "Yeah, the place is solid," he was saying. "Good bones. We're thinking we stay another year or two, then sell. Use the equity as a down payment on something bigger. Probably look in Burlington or Oakville." I turned off the tap. Equity. Sell. The word sat in my chest in a way I hadn't expected. Not because I hadn't imagined the possibility. I had, somewhere in the back of my mind. But because of the certainty in his voice. He spoke like a man who had already counted the money. He didn't know the house belonged to me. That evening, I drove home slowly. I sat in my apartment and thought about Beverly. There was a photo of her on the bookshelf, taken at Long Point Provincial Park this summer before she got sick. She was laughing at something, her hair pushed sideways by the wind off the lake. I looked at that photo for a long time. Then I called my accountant. His name is Raymond, and I've trusted him for 20 years. I told him what I'd heard. He listened, then asked me a simple question. Did they know the ownership arrangement? "No," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Hugh," he said carefully, "they can't sell what they don't own. I know that." He paused. "But you may want to sort this out before it gets further along." I thanked him and said I would. I didn't. Part of me still believed Carla would come to me. That Derek was talking loosely on the phone and nothing would actually happen. I know how that sounds. But when the alternative is accepting that your own daughter might be involved in something like this, you find ways to explain it away. Fall came. The leaves turned. Halloween went by, then Remembrance Day. Carla texted occasionally. Derek not at all. The kids, I hadn't seen them in 6 weeks. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, my granddaughter called me. Her name is Paige and she was 11 years old. She has Beverly's eyes and a more direct manner than either of her parents. She called me on a Wednesday evening just to talk, which she did sometimes, and we talked about school and her soccer team and a book she'd been reading. Then, at the end of the call, she said something that stopped me cold. "Grandpa, are you going to be at Christmas?" I said, "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" She was quiet for a moment. "Mom said things might be different this year. I don't know what that means," I told her. Not to worry about it. We said goodbye and I sat there in my apartment with the phone still in my hand. Different. 3 days later, Carla called. She asked if I could come by that Friday evening. She said she and Derek wanted to talk to me about some plans they were making for the new year. She sounded calm, organized, like someone reading from a script they'd practiced. I said yes, and I spent the next 3 days sitting with a feeling I couldn't name. Not anger, not quite fear. Something closer to the grief you feel when you already know what someone is about to tell you. Friday was cold. The kind of sharp, damp cold that comes off Lake Ontario in December. and settles into your bones. I drove over after dinner. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Christmas lights on the houses, a dusting of snow on the front lawns. The house I owned looked warm from the street. Inside, the kids were upstairs. I could hear Owen's video game through the ceiling. Paige didn't come down. Carla made tea. Derek sat at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. I noticed it but didn't say anything. We made small talk for about 5 minutes. Then Derek opened the folder. "Dad," Carla said, and I noticed she'd started using that word. Dad. More gently than usual, the way you talk to someone you're about to disappoint. "We've been doing a lot of thinking about the future." I nodded. "We feel like we've outgrown this place," Derek said. "The kids need more space. We want better schools for high school. There's a neighborhood in Burlington. We've found a house," Carla said. I waited. "We've already spoken to an agent," Derek continued. "She says we could get a strong price for this property. Market's still solid in this area. We'd use the proceeds to fund the new purchase." The folder, I realized, contained real estate documents, market comparisons, a listing agreement. I looked at my daughter. She looked back at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not quite guilt, not quite defiance. Something in between. I asked, as calmly as I could, "And where does that leave me?" Derek answered before Carla could. "We thought you'd be happy for us." He said it like he meant it, like that was genuinely what he believed. Carla reached into the folder and slid something across the table toward me. An envelope. "We found you a nice place," she said. "It's a retirement community out in Waterdown, very well reviewed. The suite has a balcony." I looked at the envelope. I didn't pick it up. "We thought you could move in sometime in January," Derek said. "Give us time to prepare the listing." The suite has a balcony. I looked at my daughter, the person I had loved since before she was born, the person Beverly and I had raised together, whose school projects I had stayed up to help with, whose first apartment I had helped paint, whose wedding I had paid for. She was sitting across from me with a brochure for a retirement residence and a real estate folder, and she seemed to genuinely believe this was reasonable. I picked up my tea, set it down, looked at the window. "When are you planning to list?" I said. "First week of January," Derek said. I nodded slowly. "All right." Carla looked relieved. That was the worst part. The relief. I drove home in the dark. The highway was quiet. I had the radio off. By the time I pulled into my parking spot in Ancaster, I had made my decision. I called Raymond that night. He picked up on the third ring. "It's time," I said. He already knew what I meant. He'd known for months. He said quietly, "Are you certain?" I looked out my window at the parking lot. A light was on in the unit above mine. 2 floors up, someone was watching television, their window flickering. "Yes," I said. "I'm certain." Raymond handled everything. He notified the agent that there was a title issue requiring review before any listing could proceed. He contacted the Real Estate Council of Ontario. He prepared the ownership documentation. Every record, every property tax filing, every maintenance invoice I'd paid for 8 years, all of it clean and clear under the numbered company. My name as managing director. My signature on every document. The listing was put on hold. Carla called me twice to ask what was going on. I told her there were some complications with the paperwork and not to worry. I kept my voice easy. Derek called once. His tone was different. He was starting to feel the ground shift under him, even if he couldn't say why. The legal process moved more slowly than I'd expected. January came and went. February arrived gray and cold, the way February always does in southern Ontario. I spent a lot of time walking the escarpment trails near my apartment. An hour up, an hour back, just the sound of the wind and the city below, and my own thoughts. Owen called me in February. He was 14 by then, quieter than his sister, more careful with words. He asked if he could come over one weekend and watch the hockey game with me. I said, of course. He showed up Saturday afternoon with a bag of chips and said very little for the first hour. Then during the second period, he said, without looking at me, "Things are weird at home." I said I imagined they were. "Dad's stressed," he said. "Mom's not sleeping well." I didn't respond to that directly. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" I thought about the question seriously before answering. "I think I will be," I said. He nodded. We watched the rest of the game in comfortable silence. The Leafs lost, as they generally do, and we shook our heads about it the way Torontonians have been doing for decades. That evening, after Owen left, I sat for a while with Beverly's photo again. I'd been talking to her more often lately. Not out loud, mostly, just in my head, the way you carry on conversations with people you've lost. I found myself wondering what she would make of all this. She had always been the one who knew when to push and when to hold back. I was the one who built things. She was the one who understood people. I thought she would have intervened much earlier. She would have seen Carla's drift before I did. She would have said something gently but plainly, the way she always did. You give a lot, Hugh, she might have said, but giving doesn't mean disappearing. The title review concluded on a Thursday in early March. Raymond called me at 8 in the morning. The notary appointment is confirmed, he said. Next Tuesday, 10 o'clock. I was quiet for a moment. They've already brought in the buyers, he added. A couple from Burlington. They seem decent. They have no idea. I felt something for those buyers, honestly. None of this was their fault. All right, I said. You don't have to be there, Hugh. Yes, I do. He didn't argue. He knew me well enough. Tuesday arrived overcast and mild, the kind of March day that almost feels like spring before it remembers itself. I wore a jacket I'd had for years, brown corduroy, the kind that Beverly always said made me look like a geography teacher. I thought she'd find that funny, me wearing it to this. I arrived at the notary's office 20 minutes early. Raymond met me in the parking lot. He looked at me steadily. Ready? Ready enough. We went in through a side entrance and waited in a small meeting room with a water jug on the table and a view of the parking lot. We could hear voices in the main office. The notary greeting people, the shuffling of coats. Derek's voice, clear and confident, talking about the Burlington neighborhood they'd been planning to move to. I sat with my hands on the table and thought about nothing in particular. At 10 minutes past 10, the notary knocked on our door and opened it. They're ready, she said. Raymond went first. I followed. The main meeting room went very quiet when I walked in. Derek had been mid-sentence. He stopped. Carla's face went through several expressions in about 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, something I can only describe as a door closing behind her eyes. The buyers, a couple in their early 50s, the wife in a green coat, looked around uncertainly. I took the empty chair across from Carla and Derek and folded my hands on the table. The notary cleared her throat. As I was explaining, she said carefully, the property registered under this address is held by a numbered corporation, 2241873, Ontario, Inc., and the listed sellers do not appear on the title. Derek's jaw tightened. There must be a mistake in the records. There isn't, she said. She slid a document across the table. The managing director of the corporation is listed here. Derek looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. Hugh, he said, and then stopped. Because I think, in that moment, the full shape of it finally reached him. 8 years. Every repair I'd made, every maintenance fee I'd paid, every time he had referred to our place in conversation. 8 years of building plans on a foundation that had never been his. Carla said my name very quietly. Dad. I looked at her. For a moment, she looked exactly like she did at 9 years old, caught, uncertain, hoping I would make things easier for her. I used to. That was the whole problem. The property belongs to me, I said. It always has. The buyers exchanged a look. The husband reached for his wife's hand under the table. I purchased it 8 years ago through a numbered company as part of my estate planning, I continued. I offered you a place to live when you needed one. The monthly payments you made covered taxes and maintenance. There was no equity being built in your names. There was never a sale to be made. Carla's eyes filled. Derek was very still. You knew, he said. It wasn't quite a question. I knew, this whole time. I waited a beat. This whole time. Derek looked at the table. Something shifted in his posture. The confidence left him all at once, the way heat leaves a room when a window opens. He didn't look dishonest in that moment. He looked young. Younger than he had any right to look. The buyers quietly asked if they could step out, and the notary escorted them to the waiting area. I didn't blame them for going. This wasn't their situation to witness. Raymond stayed beside me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. When the door closed behind the buyers, the three of us sat in the kind of silence that means something is ending. Carla spoke first. Why didn't you tell us? The question landed honestly, at least. Not an accusation. A real question. Because I kept waiting for it to not matter, I said. I kept thinking we'd find our way back to something reasonable. We could have, she started. You could have talked to me, I said. About the Burlington house. About your plans. You could have said, Dad, we want to try and buy a place. Can we talk about how this arrangement works? I would have listened. I would have helped. I paused. Instead, you handed me a brochure for a retirement home and a moving timeline. She looked down. Derek said nothing. I think he understood that silence was the only reasonable response he had left. I told them what would happen next. The arrangement was ending. I would give them 4 months. More than enough time under Ontario's Residential Tenancies Act. More than fair given the circumstances. After that, the property was mine to deal with as I chose. I wasn't forcing them into the street. I was ending something that had stopped working. Neither of them argued. Raymond and I left the building together. In the parking lot, he shook my hand. He started to say something, then seemed to decide against it. I appreciated that. Some moments don't need commentary. I drove to a diner on Concession Street that I'd been going to for years. Old-fashioned kind of place, the sort that still has laminated menus and refills coffee without being asked. I ordered a grilled cheese and a bowl of tomato soup and sat in a corner booth by the window and watched the March traffic go by. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was something like exhaustion, and underneath it, a sadness I hadn't fully expected. Not for the house or the money or the arrangement, for the years. For the version of Carla I remembered, and the version of Carla who had slid that brochure across the table. For the gap between them and all the moments I hadn't seen it growing. The soup was good. The coffee was strong. I left a decent tip and drove home. Spring arrived the way it always does in the Hamilton area. Reluctantly, then all at once. The escarpment turned green. The trails got muddy, then dry. I walked them almost every morning, sometimes with a neighbor of mine named Ed, who had retired from the school board and knew every bird call on the mountain. Paige called me twice during those months. The first time she was careful, feeling out where things stood. The second time she was just herself again, talking about soccer and a history project and a book she'd been assigned that she didn't understand. I told her what I thought the book was about. She seemed surprised that I'd read it. You know a lot of stuff, Grandpa? I told her I was old. Old people accumulate things. She laughed. It was Beverly's laugh. I've always thought that. The same shape. Owen came over twice more to watch hockey. He never asked directly about what had happened. He just showed up with chips and sat beside me on the couch, and that was its own kind of communication. 4 months after the notary appointment, Derek and Carla moved into a rental unit in the east end of Hamilton. Smaller than the house, as most things are when you start over. I heard through Paige that it took a few weeks to feel like home. Then apparently, it started to. In July, I received a letter, handwritten, which surprised me. 6 pages, Carla's writing, the same looping print she'd had since grade school. She didn't excuse what she'd done. She didn't ask me to pretend it hadn't happened. She said she had thought about the day I fixed the basement fitting, and Derek had been on the phone and wondered if I'd heard. She said she had known something was wrong for a long time and had let herself look away from it. She said she was sorry. Not the performed kind of sorry. The kind that comes when someone has finally sat down with what they actually did and faced it squarely. I read the letter twice. Then I set it on the kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea. I didn't respond right away. I gave it 2 weeks, which felt right. Then I called her. We talked for almost an hour. Not about the house, mostly. About her and Owen and Paige, about what she wanted for the next few years, about a memory she had of her mother teaching her to make pie crust one winter afternoon in the old house on the east side. I hadn't thought about that afternoon in years. We talked about it for a while. Before we hung up, she said, I know this doesn't just get fixed. I said, no, it doesn't. But some things grow back if you're patient. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she hoped that was true. I told her I thought it was. We didn't make plans that day. Plans felt premature, but something had reopened carefully, the way you open a window in early spring. Not all the way, not yet, just enough to let some air in. In September, I finalized arrangements for the house. I'd been thinking for a while about what to do with it. I had several options. What I decided, in the end, was to donate it to a housing organization that supports families transitioning out of shelters. An organization Beverly had donated to every Christmas for the last decade of her life. The tax implications were manageable, Raymond confirmed, and it felt like the right use for it. I didn't tell Carla what I'd done with the property. I'm not sure she needed to know. Some decisions are private. I celebrated my 69th birthday in October with a small group of friends at Ed's place. Someone brought a cake. Someone else brought a very good bottle of Niagara Riesling. We talked for 3 hours. I drove home at 10 o'clock and felt, walking into my apartment, something I'd almost forgotten the texture of. Content. Just quietly, genuinely content. Winter came back. I bought a new bird feeder and put it outside my balcony. Ed taught me which birds were which. I got unreasonably interested in dark-eyed juncos, which made Ed very happy. On Christmas Day, I drove to Carla and Derek's apartment for dinner. Paige had made a card and taped it to the door for me. Owen had set a place at the table before I arrived. Derek shook my hand when I came in, not confident the way he used to be, but genuinely. Carla hugged me for a long time in the kitchen and didn't say anything, and I thought that was probably right. The dinner was good. The kids were noisy. Derek made an attempt at homemade bread that didn't entirely succeed, and we were all kind enough to tell him it was great, and that was its own kind of progress. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air. The street was quiet. Christmas lights in every window, the city folded into the particular stillness that only comes on December evenings when everyone is somewhere warm. Cold coming off the lake, the way it always does. I stood there a while, my breath visible in the air, thinking about Beverly. Thinking about what she might have said about the past year. Something practical, probably. Something that cut through. She would have said, "You didn't lose anything you weren't supposed to let go of." She would have been right. There's a thing that happens when you're older and you've survived something that you weren't sure you'd survive. Not physically, emotionally. You come out the other side and you don't feel like a winner exactly. You feel like a person who finally understands which parts of life are load-bearing and which parts aren't. The house wasn't load-bearing. My self-respect was. My relationship with my grandchildren was. My ability to sleep at night and walk the mountain and sit with old friends and mean it when I laugh. All of that was load-bearing. Everything else can be rebuilt or released or given away to something that needs it more. If you found yourself in a place like the one I was in, holding things together for people who've stopped noticing the weight you're carrying, I hope this helps. Not as a strategy, not as a blueprint, just as proof that it's possible to come through something like that. And find yourself, on a cold December night, standing on someone else's porch, breathing cold air and feeling, against all reasonable expectation, okay. More than okay, grateful even, for the parts that held.